Hey guys, and welcome to the Grumpy Sound Guy YouTube channel. My name is J.R. Everhart. I am your Grumpy Sound Guy. Today we're going to really dive deep. I don't think we've had a deep dive yet into volume. I've been kind of touching on a whole bunch of this in the short format stuff with Reels and YouTube Shorts and over on TikTok. But today we're going to kind of really kind of dive deep in this conversation. This is a hot button conversation from venues, from audiences, from band members. We're going to touch on all that stuff. But before we get going with all that, I want to remind everyone, and I'm going to keep harping on this until the numbers start making sense. 80% of you guys watching this video are not subscribed to this channel. It costs absolutely nothing to hit that subscribe button. If you enjoy this kind of content and you get something out of it, give it a thumbs up. Even if you don't want to follow it with notifications, I get that. I mean, obviously I want you to, hit that little bell icon as well, but I get it. I'm a very busy man, don't want to be bothered by a whole bunch of notifications, but at least hit the subscribe button. Hit the subscribe button, and then when at your leisure or every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock, you can tune in here and you can see what I got going on and what this week's topic is and all that kind of stuff. There is a whole bunch of just a little bit of Grumpy Sound Guy news here. There's a whole bunch of really cool stuff coming down the pike for this channel and for the Grumpy Sound Guy. I'm going to be guests on some other YouTube channels, and that sort of thing. I'm getting a whole bunch of invites these days, and I'm kind of sorting through stuff. I'm being very particular about where I voice my likeness. I think in this day and age we need to be protective of our brand and the things that we are developing online. But there's a couple guys that we are in close negotiations with that we're going to do some really super cool stuff moving forward, and make sure you just keep coming back here. I'm going to keep you in the loop. I'm going to tell you when to tune in and where to tune in, and I think you're going to be very happy with how all that plays out. So up to the topic, volume. So probably one of the biggest questions, I always say, the biggest question, and it's always a different question each time, but some of these things are just hot button topics, that I hear a lot of, have a lot of conversation with guys about. Just had the singer of a really super cool corporate band down in DC contact me about 8 or 10 days ago, responding to one of the short format videos I had done about volume, asking how they can kind of tone the drums down some. We're going to cover that today. We're going to talk about that. I'm even going to dig into my little toolkit as a drummer and give you some tips and some tricks that I use as a heavy-hitting, loud-playing drummer to try and pull that volume back to the best of my ability. Look, we all, all us drummers are playing an instrument that you literally hit with a wooden stick. So there is going to be some volume involved in that. But I think there's some things that I can give you that's going to kind of help you maybe get where you want to be with that. And then we're going to have some hard conversations about, electronic drums, all that. I mean, today is a power-packed, episode. So you definitely want to stick around to the end because the truth nukes just keep on coming. So venue owners, why are my bands so loud? Why am I, employees and bartenders saying they can't hear the customer order drinks and food because the band is so loud? I got customers that are constantly coming to management complaining about the band being too loud, all that kind of stuff. The thing that I would say just across the board, we don't have enough time to really dig into all this stuff with 1,000 different details about this. So I'm going to cover the big points that really need to be touched on. And that is that you need to get honest about what your venue expectations are. Because you can have a small venue that is just too small for a full electric band. You really just need to be doing, trio acoustic acts and stuff like that, or guys playing on cajoons and, tambourines and auxiliary percussion type stuff, and maybe a digital keyboard and an acoustic guitar. All three can sing. Maybe they got a little drum machine going on. I got some friends of mine, that's their whole deal. They have drum machine, tracked on everything. and one guy in the band plays half a dozen different instruments, and you know, the woman plays some guitar and sings, and they have a really cool thing going on and can fit into like pizza shops. You know, I've seen them in little pizza parlors, you know, and it's not too loud because they're able to keep a handle on the volume that way. But as a venue, you got to ask yourself what you want to be. You know, I also know big, boomy warehouse type venues. I was a house sound guy at a venue like that in Frederick, Maryland for 5 years, and it was loud no matter what you did. It just was. It was a big room, and you would think, you know, being a big room, volume wouldn't be an issue. But, you know, when you get 1,000 people in that room, you know, you need to have a system with enough muscle to be able to push that. The only downside is the other 70% of the time when we just had a normal 200 or 300 person crowd, you know, it's a lot of volume moving around in that room. And I did my absolute best to keep front of house just a hair over stage volume so that we weren't plowing people over. I think I did a really good job with EQing. So some technical things here I'm giving you, so that it was loud, but you could still have a outside voice, I call, type conversation, you know, with your friend or whatever, even standing right in front of the stage. But you got to ask yourself what you want to be. You know, if you want to be a live music venue, then you need to stand behind the fact that live music is loud. It just is. There's just no way around it. Some bands are obviously louder than others, you know. But it's still going to be loud no matter how you shake it. Even the most well-behaved bands I had in the room I was working in was still going to be, you know, 97 to 100 dB, you know, on a normal night. Now, when we had nights where there wasn't a lot of people there, like maybe there's only 20 or 30 people in our room because there was multiple rooms in the venue, man, then, you know, we're just trying to pull it back even more, you know. But it's tough. It's tough with live music. So venues, you got to get honest and ask yourself, do you want to be a live music venue, or do you want to be a sports bar, or do you want to be a pool hall, or do you want to be a place that, you know, focuses on family environment, like a Dave & Buster's kind of, you know, a business model where you have adult games and things like that going on, where, you know, or a happy hour venue where people expect to be able to come in and hear conversations with their friends. My personal opinion about volume in a live band is when you go to see a live band and you show up at a club with a live band, it should be loud because it should demand your attention. You are there to watch a performance. It's not background music. And if that's what your patrons want, then hire a DJ. Because he has a volume knob and it's real easy to keep him under control. A live band, not so much. So get honest about where you are, what you want to be, and what your business model looks like, and then stand behind those decisions. Now, you know, rock bands seem to be louder than, say, you know, pop dance bands. I know that's painting with a broad, you know, brush stroke here, but in general, rock bands, usually rock guitar players want to bring some kind of amp on stage. The drummers are typically a little more aggressive because the music kind of dictates that. Vocals are a little more aggressive sometimes, and that sort of thing, to where pop bands tend to want to kind of just get in the pocket, create a good groove that everybody can dance to, and that's where they're going to kind of hang all night. So as a production engineer, I would approach those two genres completely differently. You know, with a rock band, I would be like, let's definitely get a drum shield up in front of the drums and try to be a drummer. This is me pulling some tricks out of my rock and roll drumming toolbox. Try to be a drummer that doesn't bash, you know, a downbeat crash on every other measure. You know, I remember Dennis Chambers talking in one of his instructional videos one time when he played with P-Funk. That was something George Clinton insisted on, was, you know, a crash on one of every other bar. You can do that with low volume cymbals and a shield and just a little less momentum behind the lumber when you're throwing the stick at it. Or you can be someone who just accents that on the hi-hat, or maybe even hit the ride. When I'm in rooms that I know I'm going to be loud in, and I'm going to be loud no matter how we shake it, but I can be less loud. I mean, let me just be real. I will accent a lot of things just on the ride, just with a ping, you know, not like crashing the ride, but just hitting a ping and letting the kick drum make that accent, and really just try to lay back and not overplay the cymbals. The cymbals is always a problem in small rooms or small stages in big rooms or that sort of thing, because they tend to be right at the same height as vocal mics and they bleed right into vocal mics. So the less you're bashing around on cymbals, then the less loud you'll be. Like I said, you're probably still going to be loud being in a rock band. So that is what it is. Now, if you're a pop dance band, and you're just kind of a heavy hitting pocket drummer, you know, that sort of thing. Maybe you're a church cat that just came from a loud environment where there was, you know, loud guitars and a Hammond, you know, blowing at, you know, 100 dB next to you. Because it always seemed like they put the Leslie next to the drummer in the church, which I absolutely love. You know, I think that's amazing. I love the sound of a B3. So maybe that's just kind of what you're accustomed to. So when you get out in some of these medium format rooms, you're a little much, you know. All of dance and pop music can be played with almost no crash cymbals. It really can. If you really stop and think about it, I know drummers are rolling their eyes at me right now. Give it a shot. Just do it at a rehearsal one time. Like, tell yourself you're only going to hit the crash cymbal on climax accents, which is going to happen 2 or 3 times in the song, instead of 20 times in a song. You know, use that technique to ping on the ride, you know, for some accents, and just make sure you're getting a solid kick behind it. You'll still get the same point across from the audience's perspective, and won't be, you know, killing the place. Snare drum is the other thing. You know, a lot of dance pop guys like a real tight snare. A lot of guys play 13-inch snares or even piccolos. Those are loud snare drums. And if you're rim shotting every hit, and I'm a rim shot every hit kind of drummer, I will sometimes tilt the drum just a little more than I'm comfortable with and make a conscious effort to just, you know, tip of the stick on the drum head. Not a rim shot, rim and head, just the head. And kind of let that float around a little bit. Look, I know how this affects the natural fluid motion of our drumming style. Believe me, I get it. I am the CEO and president of that club that just constantly complains about this is robbing me of the fun that I'm having behind the kit. And I'll be honest, it's a big reason why I barely play live music anymore. I got a couple buddies of mine. We have a little classic rock trio. Actually, we have 2 configurations of that band. Well, they're actually 2 different names, but it's basically 2 bands, but we're playing almost the same music. And I might play out maybe on a busy year 3 to 5 times a year because of that very reason. Because I'm not really having fun if I'm just not naturally playing the way it comes out of me, you know? And here comes back to what I always say about assessing your expectations of what you want to get out of this band. If you're a band that has no compromises on this stuff, like say maybe you're a 10-piece, you know, horn band, where you're going to be loud no matter what, because horns are always loud. Even without microphones, they're going to be loud. You know, maybe you're only playing big ballrooms in downtown DC or Baltimore. Maybe you're only playing outdoor festivals and stuff like that. Man, if that's the case, go on and do you, boo. You know, you do whatever it is that you have to do to, bugs flying around here in the shop. What you have to do to feel comfortable and get that groove where you want it. But if you're a band that going into the project, you know that you're going to be playing a lot of, you know, middle level clubs and stuff like that, be prepared to move your playing around a little bit. There was a band there is a band that I regularly mix that I'm really good friends with out of Baltimore called Klepto Radio. And they've had a couple different drummers that were really good at pulling this off, that were really good at having the pocket where it needs to be and really just kick, snare, and hat, a little bit of ride accent every now and then, maybe a climax of the song crash, but they kept it way laid back and they just got in that pocket and created this really cool groove that got people's, you know, bodies moving and got people up on the dance floor. Man, that's where it's at. And I mean, then the other thing is, you know, if you're a circuit band that is playing that, you know, party rock to pop, dance, R&B kind of nightclub scene, most of your band should really be direct. There shouldn't really be any, not in the 21st century here, man, okay? You know, the guitars should be direct, bass should be direct, I wouldn't put any amplifiers on stage, and everybody should be in in-ear monitors. Gosh, man, and I mean, we have these conversations inside of the production field all the time. If we could just get everybody on in-ear monitors, we could solve at least a solid 40–45% of the volume issues that we have in the middle market club scene. But you got some bands that are addicted to wedges. I've had that in advanced emails more times than I can count. They're addicted to wedges. They don't like ears, and 99% of the time, and we can do a whole nother video on in-ear monitors. If you go back to some of my earlier videos from last year, I've done some videos on in-ear monitors, but we can revisit that subject later this year. But, you know, the reality of in-ear monitors is to get a real feel for how good in-ear monitors can be, you got to spend a lot of money. You're going to spend, you know, about $1,000 on a wireless in-ear system. Or if you're a drummer or bass player that doesn't move around very much, you can get away with a $50 wired unit. You know, a Behringer P1, P2 is good. I think Rolls is the other one that I recommend. And now I think there's a couple others that are starting to hit the market in that, you know, $50 to $75, $99 range or whatever, where you can have a wired mix. But then you really need to spend at least $700 to $1,200 on a really good set of custom molded, at least triple driver in-ear monitors. Go with whatever brand you feel comfortable with, because every time I recommend a brand, it always comes back to bite me in the rear end. So I see a lot of guys using Ultimate ears these days. I've always personally been a fan of Alien ears, but I just recently recommended them to somebody who came back and told me they did not have a very good experience with those guys. I don't know what's going on at Alien ears. I'm not sponsored by them or anything. I just know some friends of mine that have used them over the years, and they've been durable, and they've got probably 8 or 10 years on the buds, and they're still working great. So it is what it is. I know the price is right with Alien ears. You know, if you go there, it's a little easier to digest than some of the prices on some of the other brands that's out there. Westtone's another one that's a big one. Shure is making the stuff, and Sennheiser as well. But man, I'm gonna be honest, I haven't really heard a Shure bud or a Sennheiser bud that came close to, you know, Westtone's or Ultimate ears or somebody like that. And there's other companies out there. Those are just the ones off the top of my head. But you know, so for all intents and purposes, for a guitar player that moves around a lot, or a lead singer, and lead singers really need them, you're probably going to get into this for about $2,000, $2,200 before it's all done and over with. And that's a big investment. I get that. But if you go with cheaper versions of that stuff, especially the cheaper wireless versions, like some of the Chinese brands and stuff like that, you know, that you're getting for $100 to $250, then, you know, you spend $150 on earbuds, and then you use it for half of a gig, and then you spend the rest of your life trash talking in your monitors because you thought they sounded like trash. I just can't do that, man. I just can't do that. And it's like, well, you really didn't give yourself the equipment that is required to make in-ear monitors work the way it should work. Again, that can be a whole nother video. I'll just leave you with that. But pop dance bands really need to be in in-ear monitors. Any band that's playing out, I'm going to say any band that's playing out more than, you know, 30 or 40 times a year, you guys should really be on in-ear monitors. If it's an isolation issue, well, then put room mics up. And I know a bunch of bands that do that. Know a bunch of bands that put room mics up. Do not pull one earbud out, because then you have to push this earbud 6 dB hotter to get it to the same volume than what it is when both of them are in and you're sealed. And, you know, that isolation bothers some people. You can get vented buds now that will let some of that ambient noise in. I prefer the 30 dB cut because it really, you know, saves your ears from stage volume, and you can control the volume that you're pounding your eardrums with. And you just throw up a couple room mics, man, and it's gonna get you where you want to go. It's what the national guys do. You know, really it is. So, you know, I'll leave you at that. I know there's people that's going to blow up the comments and say that, you know, I didn't get in a band to play direct and have an ear mix that sounds like crap, and my guitar sounds like crap in my ears. Now I'm not having fun. Okay, well, then you got to assess where you are in this business. You got to assess what your expectations are. Because if your expectations are to, you know, play out 100 times a year or 120 times a year, then you're probably 75% of those clubs are going to be volume conscious clubs. They're going to be clubs that you're going to have to really be conscious of the volume. I'm a big fan of drum shields, but drum shields don't always fix the problem, especially if it's a big warehouse room. Like this garage has 30-foot ceilings, you know. A drum shield's only going to protect some of the bleed into the vocal mics. That snare is still going to pop over that, resonate through the ceiling and come out front. When I was mixing in that club I was just telling you about, that was a big warehouse type club, rarely did I have the snare in front of house. Unless it was someone who was really disciplined, hit the snare with the tip of their stick instead of rim shots all the time. I typically did not have much snare, if any, in front of house. And it was fine. I can mix around that stuff, you know. That's what a good sound engineer does. He makes it work. No one would have known that in the room, but that's just the way it goes. So just kind of be conscious of that. 14-inch, you know, 5.5 to 6.5 deep snares tend to be a little less loud than piccolos and soprano snares and 13s and all that sort of thing, you know. Now there's a lot of variables to that depending on how you tune the drum, but you get my point. Bass rigs, let's talk about bass rigs for a second. I'm gonna go about 4 or 5 more minutes and then we're gonna call this a video for this week. If you're rolling into a club with an 810 Ampeg, you are out of your freaking mind, dude. Now listen, no one likes the body, the warmth, and the just sheer massive air that an 810 cabinet can push more than me. I love it. I used to play in a classic rock band with a guy who had 2 of them, one on each side of the kit. I was in bass guitar heaven. It was absolutely amazing. But it's also part of the reason why I'm half deaf. That and Marshall Stacks. So yeah, man, I mean, if you're gonna bring a bass amp to the gig, you know, bring a little, you know, 112 or 210 or something like that, and don't turn it up to 110 dB. You know, some of these little 210 boxes, and some guys are rolling in with 410s, dude, they can get louder than the sound system in most clubs. Your average club seats somewhere between, you know, 200 and 700 people. You know, so if you have 110 dB of bass guitar on stage, there's not going to be much bass in front of house. And in a lot of those instances, I really just bring some sub, you know, get some sub from that bass channel, and all of the mid-range and the tone is coming from the amp on stage. I'm just trying to fill it out a little bit. Again, I'm mixing around it. I'm trying to be a good sound engineer and be a team player and try to make it happen. I have no control over how loud the band is. Let me say that again. I have no control over how loud the band is. I have some control over the front of house mix, but sometimes what you're hearing in the house is coming from the stage, and I don't even have it in the mix. Guitar players, let's move on to you guys. You all are famous for that, especially these cats that roll in with some of these modern, you know, 212 combos. Some of these single 12 combos can just rip your head off. It's amazing, this stuff. 410s, you know, that stuff will really, really get it done. And it's great if you're in the studio or you're outside or you're in a big room that can handle all that, that has some acoustic treatment on the walls. But it's not conducive to most nightclubs that are booking your local club circuit. It's just not. Man, buy a Kemper or I like the Kemper, the Fractal. I see a lot of guys playing the Headroom stuff, a whole bunch of guys on the Line 6 stuff. I'm not the biggest fan of Line 6, but I've mixed a couple guitar players who really made that thing gold. You know, usually when guitar players get into those processors and customize them, they usually jack them up pretty good, and then you lose all your tone, and you just kind of got very mid-rangey, you know, guitars that have no depth or, you know, body and no tone. I do the best I can do out front, you know, to try to fatten that up with some EQing and sometimes some compression. I don't typically put compression on guitars, but, you know, if something's really, really in dire need of some help or your levels are all over the place, because that's the other thing, please sort out your levels, you know, get them all the same volume, and then like about a 4 or 5 dB boost for your solo patch. Keep clean and dirty both the same volume, no matter how you're manipulating it in your processor. That's super important, because you don't want your sound guy chasing your guitars around all night. You want him focused on your vocals, because that's what's really gonna, you know, give you the results that you want. So that's kind of my thing, guys. That's kind of my take on the whole volume thing. There's a whole bunch more we can say about this, but, you know, we're kind of up against the clock. And this is what we're going to say this time around. Thanks for tuning in. Please support the channel. Please hit the subscribe button. You know, go over to Facebook and like me on Facebook or follow me on Facebook and all that kind of stuff. COP Audio and Staging. J.R. Everhart is where a lot of the real stuff happens on Facebook. I'm also on TikTok. I think it's the Grumpy Sound Guy and or J.R. Everhart. You can find me all over. If you just Google my name, you'll find me. Everhart. Everhart. J.R. Everhart. And support this content so we can keep it flowing to you and we can keep making the world a better place, one mix at a time, one show at a time. Thanks, guys.